The clock on the wall showed 4:30 p.m. when Sophia pushed through the heavy doors of Riverside Preparatory Academy. Most students were long gone by now, rushing home in their parents' expensive cars or heading to tennis lessons and tutoring sessions. But Sophia wasn't here as a student. She was here because her father worked the evening shift, mopping floors and cleaning bathrooms in one of the city's most exclusive private schools. She spotted him right away. Papa was wheeling his gray cart down the main hallway, the one with the tall windows and fancy paintings on the walls. He wore the same dark blue uniform he'd worn for the past 5 years, his name stitched on the pocket in white thread. When he saw her, his tired face broke into a smile. "Mija, you brought your books?" he asked, switching his mop to one hand so he could ruffle her hair with the other. Sophia held up her backpack. "Got a math test tomorrow. Thought I'd study in the library again." Her father nodded, pride flickering in his eyes. At 16, Sophia was doing well at Roosevelt High, the public school across town. Not as fancy as this place, but she worked hard. She had to. Ever since Mama died 3 years ago, it had been just the two of them. Papa worked 2 jobs to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. The janitorial work at Riverside paid better than most, even if it meant he didn't get home until midnight most nights. "Go on then," he said, gesturing down the hall. "I'll be on the 2nd floor if you need me." Sophia walked through the corridors slowly, taking it all in like she always did. The floors here gleamed like mirrors. The lockers weren't dented and covered in graffiti like the ones at her school. Instead, they were a deep navy blue, each one with a built-in lock that probably cost more than her winter coat. Student artwork hung in actual frames on the walls, not taped up with masking tape that left sticky residue behind. She passed the gymnasium where the basketball team was finishing practice. Then the computer lab with its rows of brand-new laptops. Everything here seemed to sparkle, like the building itself knew it was special. But what really caught Sophia's attention, what had captured her heart from the very first day she'd walked these halls, was the music wing. She could hear it now as she got closer. The sound of instruments warming up, scales being practiced, the occasional screech of a bow against strings. Sophia slowed her steps, her math homework suddenly forgotten. She knew she shouldn't, knew she should just go to the library like she told Papa. But her feet had other ideas. The practice rooms lined both sides of a long hallway. Each one had a small window in the door, and Sophia had looked through every single one over the past few months. She'd watched a girl with perfect posture play the cello, her eyes closed as if she was somewhere far away. She'd seen a boy struggle with a clarinet piece, his face red with frustration until he finally got it right. But her favorite was always the violins. There was something about the sound that made Sophia's chest ache in a good way. It reminded her of Mama somehow, even though her mother had never played an instrument. Maybe it was the way a violin could sound happy and sad at the same time, like laughing and crying were really the same thing underneath. Sophia stopped at the last practice room, the biggest one. Through the window, she could see 5 students all around her age rehearsing together. A tall blonde girl stood at the front, clearly the leader. Her violin was tucked under her chin like it had always belonged there, and she played without even looking at the sheet music. The others followed her lead, their bows moving in perfect sync. They were playing something Sophia had heard before. She'd listened to it so many times on her phone that she'd memorized every single note. It was called The Four Seasons, some piece by a composer from hundreds of years ago. The version on her phone was scratchy and cut out sometimes because her internet was slow. But she didn't care. She must have listened to it 1,000 times. Sophia knew she should move on. If anyone caught her standing here staring like some kind of stalker, she'd be embarrassed. But she couldn't help it. She stood there, her forehead almost touching the cool glass of the door, watching the way the blonde girl's fingers danced across the strings. How did someone learn to do that? How did you make a piece of wood and some wire sound like it was alive? The practice ended, and Sophia quickly stepped back from the door, pretending to study the bulletin board on the wall. The students filed out, laughing and talking about something that happened in their chemistry class. None of them even glanced her way. To them, she was invisible, just another shadow in the hallway. When they were gone, Sophia did something she'd never done before. She tried the door handle. It wasn't locked. Her heart hammered as she slipped inside the practice room. It smelled like wood polish and old paper, Music stands stood scattered around, and a few instrument cases were stacked in the corner. But what drew Sophia's attention was the violin sitting on the piano bench, probably forgotten by one of the students who just left. She looked over her shoulder. The hallway was empty. Papa was 2 floors up, probably cleaning the science labs right now. No one would know if she just looked at it. Just for a second. Sophia approached the violin like it might bite her. Up close, it was even more beautiful than she'd imagined. The wood had a deep amber color, and the strings caught the light from the window. Very carefully, hardly breathing, she reached out and touched one string with her finger. It made a soft sound, barely there. But Sophia jerked her hand back like she'd been burned. What was she thinking? This wasn't hers. Nothing in this building was hers. She was just the janitor's daughter, the girl who didn't belong here, who only got to walk these halls because her father had a key. Sophia turned to leave, her face hot with shame. But as she reached for the door, she heard voices coming down the hallway. The same group of students was coming back, probably to get the forgotten violin. She barely had time to step behind the door before it swung open. The blonde girl walked in, followed by 2 of her friends. "I swear I left it right here," the blonde girl was saying. Then she stopped. Her eyes landed on Sophia, who was now standing awkwardly in the corner, clearly caught somewhere she shouldn't be. For a long moment, nobody said anything. Then the blonde girl smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made Sophia's stomach drop. "Well, well," the girl said, crossing her arms. "What do we have here?" Sophia's mouth went dry. She tried to think of something to say, some excuse that would make this less humiliating, but her mind was completely blank. One of the other girls giggled. "Isn't that the janitor's kid?" The blonde girl's smile got wider. "Are you interested in music?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Sophia managed a tiny nod. "Do you play?" Sophia shook her head. The blonde girl exchanged glances with her friends, and something passed between them. Something that made Sophia want to run. "Well then," the girl said, picking up her violin from the bench, "maybe we should change that." Sophia felt her face burning as the 3 girls stared at her. The blonde one, who seemed to be the leader, was still holding that violin like it was some kind of weapon. The other 2 were whispering to each other, shooting looks at Sophia that made her feel about 2 inches tall. "I'm sorry," Sophia managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. I heard the music and You were spying on us?" one of the other girls asked. She had red hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her eyebrows were raised so high they almost touched her hairline. "No, I wasn't spying. I was just listening. I'll go." Sophia moved toward the door, but the blonde girl stepped in front of her, blocking the way. Up close, Sophia could see her name tag from some school event still pinned to her jacket. Victoria. Of course her name was something fancy like that. "Wait a second," Victoria said, and that weird smile was back on her face. "You like violin music?" Sophia nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Have you ever actually held one?" Sophia shook her head. Victoria looked at her friends, and something passed between them. A silent conversation that Sophia wasn't part of. Then Victoria laughed, but it wasn't a mean laugh exactly. It was worse somehow. It was the kind of laugh that said she'd just thought of something very interesting. "You know what? The spring showcase is coming up in 3 weeks. "Okay," Sophia said slowly, not understanding where this was going. "Well, Riverside Prep has this whole thing about being inclusive and giving everyone opportunities." Victoria said the words like she was reading from a brochure. "Maybe you should perform." The red-haired girl burst out laughing. "Vicky, you're terrible," but Victoria ignored her. She was still looking at Sophia with those sharp blue eyes. "I'm serious. We could get you a violin. You could practice. And then you could play at the showcase. In front of everyone." Sophia's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Was this real? Were they actually offering her a chance to play? Or was this some kind of joke she wasn't smart enough to understand? "I don't know how to play," Sophia said. "That's okay. You've got 3 weeks to learn. How hard could it be, right?" Victoria's smile got even bigger. "We'll even help you pick out a piece. Something simple." The 3rd girl, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Are you actually doing this?"
"Why not?"
Victoria shrugged. "It'll be fun. The school is always going on about including everyone, giving opportunities to people from all backgrounds. This would be perfect." Sophia's mind was racing. She knew something was off about this. These girls didn't really want to help her. But at the same time, the thought of actually playing a violin, of standing on a real stage, it was everything she dreamed about during those long evenings wandering these hallways. "I don't have a violin," Sophia said. "We've got tons in storage, old ones that nobody uses anymore. I'll talk to Mr. Chen, the orchestra director. I'll tell him all about how you're so passionate about music and how you'd love to perform." Victoria was already pulling out her phone. "Give me your number. I'll text you when I've got it all set up." Sophia recited her number, her hands shaking slightly. This felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, not sure if there was water below or rocks. "Great," Victoria typed it in. "This is going to be amazing. Trust me." The girls left then, their laughter echoing down the hallway as they walked away. Sophia stood alone in the practice room, her mind spinning. What had just happened? Was she really going to perform at the spring showcase? She found Papa on the second floor just like he said. He was wiping down the water fountains, humming under his breath like he always did when he worked. "Papa," she said, and something in her voice made him look up right away. "What's wrong, mija?" "Nothing's wrong. Something happened." She told him everything. About being caught in the practice room, about Victoria and her friends, about the offer to play at the showcase. As she talked, she watched his face carefully, trying to see what he thought. When she finished, Papa was quiet for a long moment. He set down his cleaning cloth and looked at her with those dark eyes that always seemed to see more than she wanted them to. "These girls," he said slowly. "Do you think they were being kind?" Sophia had been asking herself the same question. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe. I mean, why else would they offer?" Papa sighed. "Sometimes people do things that seem kind, but they have other reasons. Reasons that aren't so good. But what if they're serious? What if this is real? Papa, I've wanted to play violin for so long. You know that. This might be my only chance." She could see him wrestling with it. He wanted to protect her, to keep her from getting hurt. But he also knew what it was like to dream of something you couldn't have. "If you want to try," he said finally, "then you try. But Sophia, you be careful, you watch these girls, and if anything feels wrong, you tell me. Promise?" "I promise." That night, lying in her small bed in their small apartment, Sophia couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Victoria's smile, about the way the other girls had laughed. But she also kept thinking about the violin, about the chance to actually hold one, to learn how to make music instead of just listening to it. The next day at school, Sophia could barely concentrate. She kept checking her phone, waiting for Victoria's text. It finally came during lunch. "Got you a violin. Come by the music room after school tomorrow. We'll get you set up." Sophia stared at the message for so long that her friend Rita leaned over to see what was so interesting. "Who's Victoria?" Rita asked. "And since when do you play violin?" "It's complicated," Sophia said. "Girl, you better explain because you've got this weird look on your face like you don't know if you want to laugh or throw up." So Sophia told her. Rita listened with growing disbelief. "This sounds like a setup," Rita said when Sophia finished. "Rich girls don't just randomly help people, especially not the janitor's daughter. Sorry, but you know it's true. Maybe they're different. Maybe they're planning to embarrass you in front of the whole school. Or maybe this is my shot. Rita, you know how much I love music. What if I don't take this chance and I regret it forever?" Rita shook her head but didn't argue anymore. "Just be careful, okay? These private school kids, they play different games than us." The next afternoon, Sophia showed up at the music room right after her last class at Roosevelt. Papa wouldn't be at Riverside for another hour, so she took the bus by herself. Her hands were sweating as she walked down the familiar hallways. Victoria was waiting outside the practice room with a violin case. An old one, scratched and worn, but Sophia didn't care. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Here you go," Victoria said, handing it over. "It's all yours for the next 3 weeks. Mr. Chen said it was fine. He's really excited about you performing, by the way. Thinks it's wonderful that we're being so inclusive." There was something about the way she said inclusive that made Sophia's stomach twist. But then Victoria opened the case and Sophia saw the violin inside and everything else fell away. "Thank you," Sophia whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Victoria said. "You've got a lot of work to do. The showcase is 3 weeks away, and trust me, everyone will be watching." She walked away then, leaving Sophia alone with the violin. As Sophia carefully lifted it from the case, she didn't see Victoria pull out her phone around the corner. Didn't see her texting her friends. It's done. She took the bait. This is going to be hilarious. But Sophia didn't know about any of that. All she knew was that she was finally holding a violin, finally getting her chance, and she wasn't going to waste it, no matter what anyone else thought. Sophia had never worked so hard at anything in her entire life. Every single day after school, she rushed home to their tiny apartment and locked herself in the bathroom. It was the only room with decent sound, the tiles making the violin echo in a way that almost sounded real. She'd prop her phone up on the sink, playing YouTube videos on the slowest setting so she could watch every tiny movement, every position of the fingers, every angle of the bow. Her fingers hurt. They actually hurt, developing calluses and red marks from pressing down on the strings. Her shoulder ached from holding the violin in position. Her neck got stiff from keeping her head tilted just right. But she didn't stop. Papa would come home after midnight from his second job and find her still awake, still practicing. He'd shake his head but never told her to quit. He'd just make her some tea and sit at their small kitchen table, listening to her play the same measures over and over and over. "It's sounding better, mija," he'd say, even when it didn't. Sophia had chosen her piece carefully. After watching hundreds of videos and reading everything she could find in the library, she'd decided on Winter from the Four Seasons. It was the piece she'd heard Victoria's group playing that first day. It was hard, maybe too hard, but something about it called to her. The fast parts sounded like wind and ice. The slow parts sounded like loneliness and hope all mixed together. It reminded her of Mama, of Winter 3 years ago when everything changed. She practiced the opening over and over until her arm felt like it might fall off. The notes had to be quick and sharp, like little stabs of cold. Then there was this, one part in the middle, slower and sadder, where you had to make the violin sing. That was the hardest part, making it sound like it meant something. Rita came over one evening during the second week. She sat on the toilet lid while Sophia played, wincing at some of the squeaky notes. "Okay, real talk," Rita said when Sophia finally stopped. "You've gotten way better, like scary better. When you started, it sounded like you were murdering a cat. Now it actually sounds like music." Sophia lowered the violin, her arms trembling. "You think so?" "Yeah, but I'm still worried about those girls." "Have you talked to them at all?" "Victoria texts me sometimes, asking how practice is going, sending encouragement. That's what worries me. Why would she care?" Sophia had wondered the same thing, but every time doubt crept in, she pushed it away. She had to believe this was real. She had to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone saw something in her worth giving a chance to. The third week arrived faster than Sophia expected. Suddenly the showcase was only days away, then 3 days, then 2. Papa took an evening off from his second job, something he never did, to hear her practice. She played the whole piece for him in the bathroom while he stood in the doorway. When she finished, she lowered the violin and looked at him nervously. Papa's eyes were wet. He didn't say anything for a moment, just walked over and hugged her tight. "Your mama would be so proud," he whispered. That's when Sophia started to cry too. All the stress and fear and hope came pouring out. What if she messed up? What if she got on stage and forgot everything? What if Rita was right and this whole thing was just a mean joke? "I'm scared, Papa, I know. But you know what? You're going to go out there and you're going to play. And no matter what happens, I'll be proud of you. Because you worked for this. You earned this." The day of the showcase came. Sophia wore the only dress she owned, a navy blue one that had been Mama's. It was a little too big, a little out of style, but Papa had ironed it carefully that morning. He'd even taken the whole evening off, both jobs, to be there. Sophia got to Riverside Prep 2 hours early. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She went to the bathroom 3 times. The violin case felt like it weighed 100 pounds. The auditorium was huge. Sophia had never been inside before. Red velvet seats stretched back in rows. The stage had real curtains and professional lighting. A grand piano sat off to one side. This wasn't like the gym at Roosevelt where they held assemblies. This was a real theater. People started arriving. Parents in expensive clothes, men in suits, women with pearls and perfect hair. They air-kissed each other and talked about their vacation homes and their kids' college prospects. Sophia stood backstage, feeling smaller and smaller. Victoria found her there. She was wearing a white dress that probably cost more than Sophia's entire wardrobe. Her blonde hair was curled perfectly. She looked like she belonged in a magazine. "There you are," Victoria said brightly. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," Sophia admitted. "Don't be. You're going to do great." Victoria's smile was wide and white. "Everyone is so excited to hear you play. We've been telling people all about it." Something in her tone made Sophia's stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "Oh, just that there's going to be a special performance. Something different. People are really curious." Before Sophia could ask what that meant, Victoria was gone, swept away by her parents and friends. The showcase started. Sophia watched from the wings as student after student performed. They were all so good, so polished. They'd probably been taking lessons since they were 5 years old. Their instruments gleamed under the lights. Their posture was perfect. The audience clapped politely after each performance. Sophia caught glimpses of the crowd. There were so many people, hundreds of them. She spotted Papa in the back row, still wearing his janitor uniform because he hadn't had time to change. He'd come straight from his first job. He gave her a thumbs up, and that made her feel a tiny bit better. Then she heard her name. Mr. Chen, the orchestra director, was at the microphone. He was a small man with glasses and gray hair, and he looked uncomfortable. "For our final performance of the evening, we have something a bit unusual. Sofia Rodriguez will be playing violin for us." Sophia is, well, she's new to the instrument, but she's worked very hard, and we're pleased to give her this opportunity. The way he said it made it sound like charity, like they were doing her a favor. Sophia heard whispers ripple through the audience. She saw people turning to each other, confused. In the third row, Victoria sat with her friends, and they were all smiling. That same smile from the first day, and suddenly Sophia understood. This wasn't an opportunity. This was entertainment. They wanted to watch her fail. They wanted to laugh at the janitor's daughter who thought she could play violin after 3 weeks of practice. They'd set this whole thing up just to humiliate her. Sophia's legs felt like water. She couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. A stagehand was gesturing at her. "You're on." "Go, go, I can't," Sophia whispered. "You have to. Everyone's waiting." Sophia looked out at the audience one more time. She saw the expensive clothes and the bored expressions and the people already pulling out their phones, probably to record her failure. She saw Victoria whispering to her friends. Then she saw Papa. He was standing now in the back of the auditorium. Even from the stage, she could see his face. He believed in her. After everything, after all the cleaning and the long hours and the struggle, he believed his daughter could do something beautiful. Sophia took a deep breath. She lifted the violin to her shoulder. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the bow. She could hear people in the audience laughing quietly. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered, "This is going to be painful." The spotlight hit her face hot and blinding. Sophia closed her eyes. She thought about Mama, about winter and loss and hope, about all those nights in the bathroom, practicing until her fingers bled, about Papa pushing his janitor's cart through these same hallways. Invisible to everyone. She lifted the bow to the strings and she began to play. The first note cut through the silence like a knife. It wasn't perfect. Sophia's bow trembled slightly as it touched the strings, but the sound that came out was clear and true. And it echoed through the auditorium in a way that made everyone sit up a little straighter. Then came the second note, and the third, and suddenly Sophia wasn't thinking about the audience anymore. She wasn't thinking about Victoria or the setup, or the fact that hundreds of people were watching her. She was just playing. Her fingers moved across the strings like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. The fast part of winter poured out of the violin, sharp and bright and full of energy. She could feel it in her bones, in her blood. Every hour she'd spent in that tiny bathroom, every sacrifice Papa had made, every memory of Mama, it all flowed through her and into the music. The audience went completely still. Sophia's eyes were closed, but if they'd been open, she would have seen jaws dropping. She would have seen Victoria's smug smile slowly disappearing. She would have seen Mr. Chen gripping the edge of his seat, his mouth hanging open in shock. The piece moved into the slower section, the part that had taken Sophia the longest to learn. This was where the violin had to sing, had to sound like a human voice crying out. Her bow moved gently across the strings, drawing out notes that seemed to hang in the air like snowflakes. In the back row, Papa had tears streaming down his face. He didn't bother wiping them away. He just stood there watching his daughter do something impossible. Sophia played on. The fast part came back, even more intense than before. Her fingers flew across the fingerboard. The bow danced and darted. She hit notes that should have been too difficult for someone with only 3 weeks of practice. But somehow, impossibly, she hit them. It wasn't technically perfect. A trained musician would hear the rough edges, the places where her intonation wasn't quite right, the times when her bow pressure was uneven. But what Sophia lacked in training, she made up for in something else. Something that couldn't be taught in any music school. She played like her life depended on it. Like the violin was the only way she knew how to speak. Every note carried weight, carried meaning, carried the story of a girl who'd spent 3 years watching from the sidelines, listening through doors, dreaming of something she thought she could never have. The final notes rang out clear and strong. Sophia held the last one, letting it sustain until it faded naturally into silence. Then she lowered the violin, opened her eyes, and looked out at the audience for the first time since she'd started playing. Nobody moved. For one horrible second, Sophia thought she'd somehow messed up without realizing it. That everyone was sitting there in shock at how bad it had been. That Victoria's plan had worked after all. Then someone started clapping. It was Papa, standing in the back row applauding so hard his hands must have hurt. His face was wet with tears, but he was smiling wider than Sophia had ever seen him smile. And then someone else joined in. An older woman in the front row wearing a pearl necklace. Then another person. And another. And suddenly the entire auditorium was on its feet, clapping and cheering like Sophia had just performed at Carnegie Hall. Mr. Chen rushed onto the stage. He was crying too, not even trying to hide it. He grabbed Sophia's hands and just stared at her like he'd never seen her before. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he demanded. "Who taught you?" Sophia's voice came out shaky. "I taught myself. YouTube videos, library books. I listened and I practiced. 3 weeks. You learned this in 3 weeks?" Sophia nodded. Mr. Chen turned to face the audience, still holding Sophia's hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed is pure raw talent. This young woman has never had a formal lesson in her life. She borrowed an old violin from our storage room and taught herself one of the most difficult pieces in the classical repertoire in less than a month." The applause got even louder. People were standing, cheering, some of them wiping their own eyes. Sophia saw parents nudging their kids, pointing at her. She saw teachers from the school looking stunned. She saw the school principal, a stern woman named Dr. Hayes, staring at her with an expression Sophia couldn't quite read. Then Sophia's eyes found Victoria. The girl was still sitting, not clapping, not standing. Her face had gone pale. Her friends around her looked equally shocked, like they couldn't process what had just happened. Their joke had backfired in the worst possible way. Someone was making their way down the aisle now. An elderly woman, elegantly dressed, with silver hair and kind eyes. She came right up to the stage and Mr. Chen helped her up the steps. "My name is Eleanor Ashford," the woman said, her voice carrying through the auditorium even without a microphone. "My granddaughter attends this school. I've been coming to these showcases for 10 years and I have never ever heard anything like what I just heard." She turned to Sophia. "What's your name, dear?" "Sophia Rodriguez, ma'am. And your father is here?" Sophia nodded and pointed to the back. Papa looked terrified, like he thought he was in trouble. Mrs. Ashford gestured for him to come down. He hesitated, then slowly made his way down the aisle in his janitor's uniform, his eyes wide. When he reached the stage, Mrs. Ashford shook his hand firmly. Mr. Rodriguez, you should be very proud. Your daughter has an extraordinary gift. Papa's English wasn't great, but he understood enough. Thank you, he managed. She worked very hard. Mrs. Ashford turned back to face the crowd. I want everyone here to understand what just happened. This young woman was given an old violin in 3 weeks, and she taught herself to play like this. Imagine what she could do with proper training. With a real instrument, with the opportunities that so many of us take for granted. She paused, then looked directly at Dr. Hayes. I think Riverside Prep needs to do something about this. Don't you? Dr. Hayes stood up. She looked uncomfortable, probably realizing that whatever had led to Sophia being on that stage tonight wasn't quite as innocent as it seemed. Mrs. Ashford, perhaps we could discuss this in private. I don't think so. I think we should discuss it right here, right now. Mrs. Ashford's voice was gentle but firm. I'd like to offer Sophia a full scholarship to Riverside Preparatory Academy, and I'd like to personally fund private violin lessons with the best instructor in the city. The auditorium erupted in applause again. Sophia felt like she might faint. Papa grabbed her hand, his own shaking. Wait, Sophia said, her voice small. I don't understand. Why would you do that? Mrs. Ashford smiled. Because talent like yours doesn't come along often, and because everyone deserves a chance to reach their potential, regardless of where they come from or who their parents are. She glanced meaningfully at Victoria and her friends. Some people are born with every advantage in the world and waste it. Others have to fight for every opportunity. I've always preferred to invest in fighters. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Mrs. Ashford is one of our most generous donors. If she believes Sophia deserves this opportunity, then Riverside Prep will make it happen. She looked at Sophia, her expression softer now. We would be honored to have you as a student. Sophia couldn't speak. She just stood there holding Papa's hand, trying to understand how her entire life had just changed in the space of 15 minutes. Mr. Chen was wiping his glasses, still emotional. I'll need to know everything about how you practiced, what resources you used. This is remarkable, truly remarkable. People started crowding around the stage wanting to congratulate Sophia, to shake her hand, to take pictures with her. In all the chaos, Victoria and her friends slipped out quietly. But not before Sophia caught Victoria's eye one last time. The girl looked like she wanted to say something. Her mouth opened, then closed. Then she turned and left, her white dress disappearing through the auditorium doors. Sophia barely noticed. She was too busy being hugged by Papa, who was crying and laughing at the same time, speaking rapid Spanish about how Mama would have been so happy, so proud, so amazed. Mrs. Ashford waited patiently until the crowd thinned a bit, then approached Sophia again. I mean what I said, dear. Every word. But I want you to know something else. She leaned in closer. I've been around long enough to recognize when something doesn't smell right. Those girls who got you this violin, they weren't trying to help you, were they? Sophia hesitated, then shook her head. I thought so. Well, the best revenge is success, and something tells me you're going to be very successful indeed. As Sophia left the auditorium that night, violin case in hand, walking next to Papa, who couldn't stop smiling, she realized that everything had changed. The hallways she'd walked as an invisible shadow would now be her hallways. The school where Papa pushed his cleaning cart would now be her school. But the best part, the part that made her heart feel like it might burst, was simpler than all of that. She'd played the violin, really played it, and people had listened, really listened. Whatever came next, nobody could take that away from her. 6 months changed everything. Sophia walked through the halls of Riverside Prep now as a student, not a shadow. She wore the uniform, carried the same books as everyone else, sat in classes where teachers knew her name. But it still felt strange sometimes, like wearing shoes that didn't quite fit yet. The private violin lessons Mrs. Ashford had promised turned out to be with a woman named Ms. Keiko Chen, a concert violinist who'd played in orchestras all over the world. She was strict and demanding and didn't care that Sophia was still learning. She expected excellence, and somehow Sophia found ways to deliver it. You have bad habits from teaching yourself, Ms. Chen said during their first lesson. We fix them. But your feeling, your emotion, that is already perfect. That cannot be taught. Sophia practiced every day, but now she had a real practice room at school. A space of her own with good acoustics and a music stand and nobody banging on the door telling her to hurry up. She still practiced in the bathroom at home sometimes, though, out of habit. It felt like home there. Papa still worked at Riverside, still pushed his cart down the hallways. Some people thought it was weird that he kept the job after Sophia got her scholarship, but Sophia understood why. He was proud of his work. He liked keeping things clean and orderly, and maybe in his own way he wanted to stay close to her new world without intruding on it. "You're doing good, Mija," he'd say when they passed each other in the halls. Other students would stare, not understanding their relationship, but Sophia didn't care anymore. The biggest surprise came about 2 months into the school year. Sophia was in the practice room when someone knocked on the door. She opened it to find Victoria standing there, looking nervous. They hadn't really spoken since the showcase. Victoria had been disciplined by the school when Dr. Hayes figured out what had really happened that night. She'd lost her position as first chair in the orchestra and had to do community service every Saturday for 3 months. "Can I come in?" Victoria asked, her voice small. Sophia hesitated, then stepped aside. Victoria entered and closed the door behind her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I'm sorry," Victoria finally said. "I know that's not enough. I know saying sorry doesn't fix what I did, but I need you to know that I am. Sorry, I mean." Sophia set down her violin. "Why did you do it?" Victoria sat down on the piano bench, looking at her hands. "Honestly, because I'm a terrible person. Or I was. I don't know." She looked up at Sophia. "You know what the worst part is? I've been playing violin since I was 4 years old. 10 years of lessons. The best teachers. The most expensive instruments. And you played better than me after 3 weeks." "That's not true," Sophia said. "It is. You played with something I don't have. I realized that night that I'd been playing violin my whole life, but I never actually loved it. Not like you do. It was just another thing my parents made me do, like tennis and French and debate club. But you play like it matters, like it's the only thing that matters." Sophia didn't know what to say to that. "Anyway," Victoria continued, "I'm doing community service at this rec center downtown, teaching kids basic music, and I hate to admit it, but it's actually kind of great. These kids don't have anything, but they show up every week so excited to learn. It reminded me of you, of how much you wanted this. Is this why you came here? To tell me about your community service?" "No, I came to ask if you want help." Victoria took a deep breath. "I heard you talking to Mr. Chen about starting some kind of program to teach music to kids who can't afford lessons. I want to help with that. If you'll let me." Sophia studied Victoria's face, looking for signs of another trick, another setup. But all she saw was someone who looked genuinely sorry. Someone who'd learned something. "Okay," Sophia said. "But I'm in charge." Victoria smiled, a real smile this time. "Obviously, you're the one who actually knows how to teach herself violin in 3 weeks. I clearly have no idea what I'm doing." That's how Hidden Harmonies started. Sophia pitched the idea to Dr. Hayes, who loved it, probably because it made the school look good. Every Saturday afternoon, the music rooms at Riverside opened up to kids from all over the city. Kids whose parents worked 2 jobs like Papa. Kids who'd never touched an instrument before. Kids who thought music was something that happened to other people. Victoria showed up every single week. At first, Sophia thought she'd get bored and quit, but she didn't. She was patient with the kids, encouraging, never making them feel stupid when they messed up. The community service requirement ended after 3 months, but Victoria kept coming anyway. Other students from Riverside started volunteering too. The red-haired girl who'd been with Victoria that first day, her name was Hannah, showed up one Saturday looking embarrassed. "I was terrible to you," she said to Sophia. "I'd like to help, if that's okay." Sophia handed her a stack of sheet music. "We need someone to work with the beginners on reading notes." "I can do that." By winter, they had 40 kids in the program. The practice rooms filled up with sound every Saturday. Not always good sound. Plenty of squeaks and wrong notes and frustrated sighs, but real sound. The sound of people learning, growing, trying. Mrs. Ashford visited one Saturday and watched with tears in her eyes. "This is exactly what I hoped would happen," she told Sophia. "You took your gift and you're giving it away. That's rare." Sophia's grades were good enough that she started getting letters from colleges, big schools with famous music programs, scholarships offers, opportunities that would have seemed impossible a year ago. But something inside her had shifted. She talked to Papa about it one evening at home. They were sitting at their small kitchen table, the same one where he used to listen to her practice at midnight. "Juilliard wants me," Sophia said, showing him the letter. Full scholarship, Papa's eyes went wide. Mija, that's incredible. I know. But I've been thinking. There's this program at State University. It's not as fancy, but they have a really good education department. I could study music and teaching at the same time. You want to be a teacher? Sophia nodded. I want to work in public schools. Schools like Roosevelt, where kids don't have much, but they deserve good music programs anyway. I want to be the teacher I never had. Papa reached across the table and took her hand. Your mama would be so proud. I'm so proud. You don't think I'm wasting my talent? Talent is only wasted when you use it for yourself. You want to use it for others. That's not waste. That's purpose. The final showcase of the year arrived. Sophia had been chosen to perform again. But this time it was different. This time she belonged there. She wore a new dress that Mrs. Ashford had bought her. Her violin was a beautiful instrument, not borrowed from storage, but actually hers. She played a piece she'd written herself. She'd been working on it for months, and it told a story. The story of a girl who watched from the outside, who dreamed of music, who was given a chance and took it and used it to open doors for others. The auditorium was packed. Papa sat in the front row this time, not in his janitor's uniform, but in a suit Sophia had bought him with money from her part-time job at the music store. Rita was there, along with kids from Hidden Harmonies and their families. Mr. Chen sat next to Miss Chen, both of them beaming. Mrs. Ashford had an entire row of friends and family with her, and in the back, Sophia spotted Victoria sitting with her parents. When their eyes met, Victoria gave her a thumbs up. Sophia lifted her violin and began to play. The music swelled and dipped, fast parts and slow parts, moments of struggle and moments of triumph. It sounded like winter giving way to spring, like closed doors opening, like voices that had been silent finally learning to sing. When she finished, the applause was deafening. But Sophia wasn't thinking about the applause. She was thinking about the little girl who'd be in Hidden Harmonies next week, holding a violin for the first time. The girl who maybe thought music wasn't for people like her. Sophia would be there to show her different. After the showcase, people crowded around wanting to talk to her, but Sophia made her way through them to Papa first. He hugged her so tight she could barely breathe. You did it, he whispered. You really did it. We did it, Sophia corrected him. None of this happens without you, Papa. Later, as they walked out of the auditorium together, Sophia carrying her violin case and Papa carrying her flowers, she thought about how much had changed. How one moment of cruelty had turned into an opportunity. How the worst thing someone tried to do to her had become the best thing that ever happened. She thought about all the kids she'd teach, all the music she'd make, all the doors she'd help open for people who thought they'd always be locked out. The janitor's daughter had found her voice, and she was going to make sure nobody else had to stay silent ever again. Sophia looked up at the night sky, at the stars scattered above them, and smiled. This was only the beginning.